Hi, welcome to Miss Music. On this video, I'm checking out my top 10 favorite albums of 2022. In part 1, I looked at numbers 10 to 6, and now I'm going to look at 5 to 1. What is my most favorite album of this year? And do you agree? Do you agree with my choices? Are there albums that you have listened to this year that you really, really love and you want to share that with us? So at number 5 is White Lines, and the album is As I Fall Apart. It's got 68 on Metacritic, probably the lowest scoring album of all the albums that I've looked at on these two videos. The critics are wrong. It's a really, really good. It took me a while to get into. I must admit, I don't like normally this kind of deep baritone voice. It may not be a baritone. If not, let me know. I don't know. But it's a style of singing, a style of voice I don't normally get into. It took me a while to get into this album. Now I absolutely love it. Like a couple of the albums I spoke about on the last video, this has, for me, a real kind of 80s sound to it. And I think that's a little bit of a barrier being a teenager in the 80s. You know, I hated a lot of that 80s music that now everyone loves and thinks was brilliant. So when I hear something like this, I immediately think, ooh, I'm not sure. But it did really grow on me. I do really love it. So for me, the song to check out is Am I Really Gonna Die? It's just a brilliant song. It's got this great driving, pumping bass line, and the track just builds brilliantly to the chorus. And when the chorus happens, it really happens. And then the other track I would suggest is I Don't Want to Go to Mars. I don't know what this song is about, but in my mind, it's a real kind of two fingers up to Elon Musk and his like. This is a big song with a big sound to match. It's really great. Check it out if you haven't listened to this album. Now, number 4, maybe this is not going to be anyone's choice, but I'm sorry, whenever Kristin Hersh makes an album as Kristin Hersh, as the Throwing Muses, as 50 Foot Wave, I'm going to love it to death. And Black Pearl by 50 Foot Wave is a challenging listen, but it's a really rewarding listen too. It was released in April and received 77 on Metacritic. This album lacks that kind of thumping, raw energy of earlier 50 Foot Wave albums. It's much slower, pensive, inward looking. And the more you listen to it, the more depth it has. It's a darker album, I think, than the previous ones, much more dense, much more rich and fulfilling. So check out Staring at the Sun. It's brilliant. I saw Kristin Hersh a while back. I made a video of that live concert, and there you get Staring at the Sun as an acoustic version. It works really well, both as an acoustic and electric version. Number 3 is by someone that I wanted to make a video about, but I keep forgetting, which is terrible. This is Aldous Harding and her album Warm Chris. This was released in March and got 82 on Metacritic, so it's really one of those albums that everybody likes. If you don't know Aldous Harding, you really, really have missed out on something extraordinary. I think she is one of the exceptional talents making music at the moment. I am just completely intrigued by her. I've seen her live. I watched her live recordings. I'm just amazed by the different characters that seem to come from her voice, different ways of singing, that her voice can change 3 or 4 times in the same song. And when you see her singing live, this is accompanied with a whole contortion of her face in order to produce these quite strange and beautiful sounds. So what track to check out? I would recommend listening to TikTok. This track really shows the range of Harding's voice, these kind of odd vocal sounds, odd character sounds that come out while she's singing. And it's just a brilliant track as well. So only 2 more albums left. And the number 2 is probably the most challenging listen on this list. It's Brad Mehldau and his album Jacob's Ladder. It was released in March and it got 74 on Metacritic. I noticed the Daily Telegraph gave it a very bad review. If you get a bad review from the Daily Telegraph, that means you're doing something really, really right. And it's just a super album. If you don't know Meldau, he's a jazz pianist. He's made a lot of albums. I've been listening to more and more of his work. It's just sublime. He writes original scores, but he often takes music by other people like the Beatles or Radiohead, or on this album Rush or Yes or Gentle Giant, and he transforms their tracks to, you know, really interesting results. There's a really great version of Rush's Tom Sawyer on this album, really interesting. But I would say the track to listen to is his reimagining of Yes's Starship Trooper. It's absolutely sublime, and at the end it finishes with just the most beautiful piano playing. Just marvelous. So what's number one? It is Jockstrap's I Love You, Jennifer B. This was released in September. It got 89 on Metacritic, and it's an album I've just grown to love more and more. What makes this album so special is just its uniqueness. The tracks don't do what they're supposed to do. They don't conform to songwriting. You start listening to a track thinking, oh, I know where this is going, and it goes somewhere completely different. And I think that's marvelous. What's the point in listening to something if you know exactly what it's going to do? It's great to be surprised. There seems to be a lot of influences on this album. This is a group that really have superb knowledge of all types of music, but it's not a kind of copying of other people's styles. It's just using ideas and bringing them together and making something completely different. I would suggest listening to the first track, Neon. It's fascinating. It starts almost like a folk ballad, and then it turns into something different. I don't know if you agree. To me, there's a kind of nod to Portishead in this track, but also to Peter Gabriel. And if you're not getting that, then have a quick listen to the track Darkness on Peter Gabriel's album Up. And, you know, you'll see it, I think. You'll hear it if you listen to those two tracks together. Then the next track I would say listen to is called Deborah. I was listening to this track a few days ago, and it's one of those kind of times when suddenly, for some reason, you really start hearing the lyrics rather than the song. And there was this one lyric, grief is just love with nowhere to go. When I heard that, it just stopped me dead in my tracks. It's such a powerful line. Grief is love with nowhere to go. It's so poetic. And again, I love the changing styles in Deborah. I like the fact that I'm, you know, if my attention is drawn somewhere else, I'm thinking, is this the same song as I was listening to 2 minutes ago, or is this a new song? And I really love that. It's really brilliant. Over the two videos, these are my 10 favourite albums from 2022. I really hope some of these albums are albums that you haven't heard of, that you're going to listen to and think, wow, this is fantastic. So once again, thanks for listening. It is just a sheer pleasure making these videos. Thanks for listening.